Hello again. Kurt, it made me laugh when you said you couldn't pronounce my last name, because wait till you hear Stephanie's last name. It's my pleasure to introduce Stephanie AlKhafaji. She is the Chief Operating Officer at the Children's Home Association of Illinois, where she oversees all agency operations, program deliverables, and has led transformational change internally. Spearheading the agency's 5-year strategic plan, she has made incredible strides in the employee value proposition and experience. Stephanie's background includes project management, business consulting, strategy, and marketing and communications. She has her Master of Arts in Organizational Communication from Ball State University, her undergraduate in Corporate Communications from Eastern Illinois University, was inducted into the 2019 class of 40 Leaders Under 40, and is a Community Leadership School graduate. She is active in our community, having served on the boards for the Center for Prevention of Abuse and the Women's Fund of Central Illinois. She holds memberships with the Junior League, which is how I know her, the Association of Fundraising Professionals, and the Community Leadership School Planning Committee. Please welcome Stephanie.
Well, thank you so much. Yes, I did lean over to Andrea and say, oh man, if your name gives people a rough go, then my name doesn't stand a chance. But it's great to be here. Yes, my name is Stephanie AlKhafaji, and like Andrea mentioned, I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Children's Home Association of Illinois. I'm joined also by Camille Simpson, who's our Chief of External Affairs. And we're really, really excited to be here. So thank you so much for the invitation. Today, what I'd like to do is share a little bit about our agency, beginning with our mission, some of the programs that we offer to the community, and then I'll wrap with ways that you might get involved if you're interested in supporting our mission and our vision. If you have been around the Peoria community for a while, you're probably familiar at minimum with the idea of Children's Home. But one thing that we find often is that people don't know really the depths of what our agency does. And we do a lot in the community. We have several programs that are far-reaching. We have over 450 staff, so we're one of the area's largest employers, and we're really proud of the impact that we've had. So I'm hoping to share a little bit of that with you, and certainly finish by answering any questions you might have. I'll start with what is, to me, our kind of most important driving factor, which is our mission and our vision. The mission at Children's Home, as you can see, is to help the kids and families who need it most. And that's a deceptively simple mission, but I assure you it is simple by design. There's sort of two parts that I always like to point out when we're talking about the mission of Children's Home. And the first is kids and families. So our agency has been in existence for 156 years. And in that time, we've learned a few things. And one of them is that you can provide all the support services to at-risk youth. And they can be doing really well and making great strides. But when they re-enter their home environment, so whether that looks like returning to their home school district or to a biological family or to a community if that's outside of Peoria, if you haven't provided the wraparound services to that kind of ecosystem, all the great work that you did with one particular kid kind of falls to the wayside. So that's something that we take very seriously. So we provide services to the kids and the families in totality, sort of a unit. And then the second part of that statement is really important, and it's who need it most. So over 156 years, our agency has certainly evolved. We've served several different populations. Really, the population that we serve now are young people with very significant behavioral health challenges. So those are clients who come from some pretty egregious trauma and abuse, violence, neglect in their background. And as a result, they're experiencing some mental health challenges. The reason that is our population now is because over the last 10, 15 years, we've seen such a staggering uptick in mental health needs for youth, particularly for at-risk youth. And then you'll see down here, our vision is to change the lives of the kids who will change the world. And I know that's a really lofty, that's a very lofty statement. And lots of times people think like, oh yeah, okay, good luck with that one, change the world. But we mean that very seriously. And one of the great benefits of working at Children's Home is every single day I get to see this in action. So for me, when I think of this statement, I actually think of one particular client. Her name's Olivia, and she's really special to our agency. But something that's also really special to our agency is every staff member at Children's Home kind of has their own kid or their own client that they think of when they think of this statement. Olivia, for me, is a young girl who came into our care at 5 years old. She's now 21 years old. She goes to Greenville University. She's in student government. She is just rocking all of her classes. She's a stellar track and field athlete, and she wants to become a teacher. And you know, for a kid who struggled so much in school growing up, it's astounding to us when she said, "I want to become a teacher." We thought, "Oh gosh, Olivia, you of all people, I mean, you hated school." And she does. And the reason she said that is because she wants to have an impact on kids the way that Children's Home had an impact on her. And that's really special. And I know Olivia will have an impact on one classroom and then another classroom and another classroom. And those kids will go on to impact others too, in the way that we've been able to help Olivia. And when you start to think about those ripples, you know, suddenly changing the world doesn't seem that far off. And that's exactly kind of what our vision is. Each month, Children's Home provides services to 1,800 kids each month. So when you think about 1,800 kids a month and having an impact on them and what impact they will have on their ecosystems, it is quite possible to change the world, and we take a lot of pride in doing that. So a little bit about our history. I mentioned that we're 156 years old, so we look really great for how old we are, but we've come a long way. Like I mentioned, the population, of course, has evolved and changed over the years, but there are some things that have stayed the same. So at our origin was a group of women in the community. If you're a Peorian like myself, Lydia Moss Bradley was one of those. That's a name that most people recognize, that got together and sought to provide resources to other women in the community. So food, medicine, and they would take those resources to women's homes and they would drop them off, and you know, folks would be better off for it. And one of the things that they were seeing is that many times the women that they were helping, they were really struggling with poverty, and they thought, you know, what we're doing is good, but it's not a systemic solution to poverty. So they made a small pivot and they introduced what at the time was called the Industrial Trade School. So they started teaching women to sew as a means of being able to earn their own income. And that was, you know, seems very simplistic at the time. It seems, you know, sort of obvious, but at the time it was truly revolutionary for this group of women to be doing that on their own. So they were really pioneers in that field. Wartime came and many of these men that were in these women's lives left for war, and they had to get jobs themselves. And what they saw was a change in need for the population that they served, which was many women had too many children at home that they just simply couldn't take care of. They could not work and take care of a home full of children. And at that time, the Christian Home Mission, which is what it was formerly called, became known as Children's Home, and it became kind of a standard orphanage, not a term we would use any longer, but a term that they used at the time, the standard orphanage that we think of. So if you're familiar with the Children's Home building on Knoxville, it is that huge brick building. You know, at one time, children, yes, they did live there. Children no longer live there today, which is something that is typically surprising to folks in the community. Now frankly, it's just a bunch of boring people like myself and our marketing and our HR team. But children did live there at the time. And that was what our agency was for quite some time. It met the need of that particular period. And if you recall back to our mission statement, who need it most has been very central to what our agency is and does. We pivot to meet the greatest need, and we sort of run in to answer that call. So the agency has certainly evolved. One of the things that has not changed that I think is very special that everyone at our agency takes a lot of pride in is this idea of home visiting. So I mentioned that original group of women would go out into the community to provide resources, and that was impactful, that was meaningful to them. still today, that is kind of the core business model of Children's Home when we talk about mental health and behavioral health services. So many of our programs are still considered at home or community-based programs, meaning we would send a therapist into someone's home rather than the traditional or more obvious notion of therapy where you might, go to a therapist's office and chat with them for an hour and then leave. That's not feasible. It's not realistic for many of our clients. So we go into their home. Similarly, we've got some programs that send resources outside of therapeutic clinicians, nurses, for example, into folks' homes. For example, if they just recently had a baby, or if they are struggling with a particular set of life circumstances. And I'll get into all the specifics of our program, but I think it is really neat that even after 156 years, we've been able to maintain the integrity of that sort of business model of community-based programs. Many of the clients that we serve, had we not offered those community-based programs, if we didn't have it kind of in our DNA to meet them where they are, they would not have an opportunity to receive those services. So with that, I mentioned that we have a variety of services ranging far beyond kind of traditional and historic orphanage services that I'd like to share with you. Because I often find that people in our community, even those who have lived here perhaps their entire life, are always surprised at the breadth of services we provide. So essentially here we've got kind of 5 columns or 5 pillars: placement services, education, clinical services, community-based programs, and then prevention services. And I'll break those down a little bit. Placement services are the one column that we're probably most known for. So those are residential facilities as well as foster care and intact family services. So this time last year across the state of Illinois, there were 18,000 youth in care. And when I say youth in care, I mean kids, for lack of a better term, sort of stuck in the system with nowhere to go. They do not have permanent placement. They do not have permanent housing. They do not have a permanent home. 18,000 in our state. That was last year. In that time, as I stand up here today, we're at 21,000. So that's not the trend that we want to be seeing. And that is a rapid uptick in kids who are stuck in a system with nowhere to go. And that's where our placement division comes in. So you'll note here, perhaps you've heard of our one of our residential campuses known as Youth Farm. So we provide 24/7 care to kids in need. We're considered a severe residential facility. So if the state of Illinois refers a kid to live at Youth Farm, it's as a result of needing some very significant behavioral health and mental health support. Many times there's nowhere left for these kids to go. They have probably bounced around to several placements. They might have been in foster family 1, 2, 3 with a brother, with an aunt, with an uncle, in a hospitalization setting. And if they're not successful at Youth Farm, the next step is a locked psychiatric facility. So we're sort of the last step in a less restrictive environment, but it is a rather restrictive environment in that they're staffed 24/7 and kids live on that campus with us. Similar to that is our supervised independent living program, slightly older kids and kids who have a little bit more autonomy. These are kids who are moving on to independence, but need some last step helps in figuring out what independent life looks like. So they live in group homes in the community, of which we have 4, and they receive life skills supports. We might teach them how to go about getting a job and maintaining a job, what relationships with a landlord look like and what they can expect. And many of the things that growing up, I'm certain that lots of you in this room, and we took for granted. We had the privilege of having folks or having people in our lives who would model that for us. And the kids that we're working with simply didn't have that. So things that seem obvious to us are not so obvious to them, and they need some additional help. Foster care and intact family services are both state-run services. Foster care is probably exactly what you think. We're one of several foster care programs in our area. We've got about 250 foster families. And like I mentioned, with numbers like 21,000, we could triple, quadruple that, and we still would not meet the need. The Peoria County is actually the third highest county in the state of Illinois when it comes to youth and care. So in our county alone, there are 900 kids right now who we could put in foster placement if we had placements for them. And then Impact Family Services is a program that we provide if a family is on the radar of the state as a potential unhealthy environment for that kid. We send in a team to kind of put all the measures, the last stitch efforts in place to say, before these children are removed from your home, can we help you set up an environment that is safe and stable and healthy for them? So it's our sort of preventative last stitch effort there. So those are our placement programs. We also have 2 schools that operate fully functional under the Children's Home umbrella. One of them is Kiefer School. It's a therapeutic day school. If the kid is not thriving in their home school district, they would be referred to Kiefer. And the second is the Academy for Autism, which is just as it sounds, a special curriculum for students on the autism spectrum. We also have a clinical division, so several community-based programs. I certainly won't walk you through all of those, but I do want to point out one in particular. This one right here, mobile crisis response. So all of the psychiatric crisis that youth in our community experience funnel through Children's Home. And that's not at-risk youth, that's any youth. So it could be any of our children, your neighbor's children. If a kid is having a psychiatric crisis at school, at the library, at church, they will, a provider will call the mobile crisis response team, which is housed under Children's Home. So we filter all of those and help determine yes or no, does this child need psychiatric hospitalization, or do they need additional outside services? It's of course always our goal to limit psychiatric hospitalization if that's not necessary. We have several community-based programs. So these are essentially grant-funded programs within our community that we are tackling students who are at risk of not graduating high school. We provide teams to support them and help them along that journey, keeping kids out of the juvenile justice system, or if they find themselves getting involved with that, providing them some services. And then lastly here, we've got all of our prevention services. So in this kind of pillar, it's our goal that if we do everything right with these clients, we never see them again. That would be the ideal situation. So providing services to parenting teens, at-risk mothers, folks who may not have a support system to help kind of guide them through welcoming a child into the world. So we've got teams of nurses, of doulas, of therapists. Many of our clients in this particular program, they're young at-risk women, frankly, who don't have additional family or additional supports, and they find themselves alone and pregnant and needing some support. So in that situation, we've got doulas right now who are with some of our clients, delivering in the delivery room, right next to them, alongside of them, and they will kind of remain in their lives up until that child is 5 years old to really ensure that they start their family on the right foot. Like I said, if we do everything right there, hopefully we never see any of those people again, and they're able to move on with their lives and integrate into society just fine. So that's a little bit about all of our programs. Like I said, most people don't realize that we have such a breadth of offering, and we're proud that we do. And as you can see with all of those programs, we've got a decent impact on our community, and that's really special. It's something that we're proud of. I mentioned that we see 1,800 clients a month, which is a really, really staggering number. Most people wonder how old is an average client? Are they little? Are they babies? Are they young toddlers? And that's not actually true. They're older kids. So 15 is the average age. And you can see whether it's foster care, or I mentioned the mobile crisis response program, we're involved with support services to at-risk youth in the community at a variety of levels. So whether you realize it or not, Children's Home has probably had some impact or some involvement with a kid or with multiple kids that because we're so far reaching in the community when it comes to youth services. Now, one of the things I wanted to make sure that we had time to talk about today is how you might be able to get involved. If anything I mentioned was touching or had an impact on you, and you're wondering, wow, that sounds like a really great mission that I would love to contribute to, you're in luck, because I certainly have ways that you can do that. So we host several events throughout the year that are sort of standard, and I'd ask that you already start marking your calendar for any of these. In the spring, we host an online giving campaign where we really kind of tell the stories, the success stories of our clients. In the past year or two, we've kind of changed as an agency on our willingness to do this. You know, they're not always easy conversations to have because of the nature, the population that we deal with. But man, we've got some really great success stories that we're proud of and we wanted to share with you. So Camille is actually the architect behind this year's Futures Worth Fighting For campaign, where we highlighted some of those success stories, and we plan to do that into the future because we're just very proud of the hard work that our clients have put in. Circles of Influence is a new event this year that we introduced, happens in June. Perhaps you were involved in this year's kind of inaugural event. It's where we get folks together, we get kind of the inner circle of our agency and ask them to invite their inner circles together so that we can kind of expand our influence and our reach, because the more community support we have for all of these programs, the better off we are. I always owe a huge debt of gratitude to Maui Gym, which is our largest corporate sponsor. They host an event for us every year. They're very, very gracious donors, and we owe them a debt of gratitude. We host a cattle auction, which is not actually an auction of livestock, but it was at one point in time. And now it is just a really fun event where we get together and kind of a Southwestern chic themed event this year and raise money for a good cause. And then certainly our holiday campaign, which is one of the things I want to make sure we talk about today. I'll come back to these in just a sec. So our holiday wish list campaign, every year we commit to making sure that every single one of our clients gets a personalized set of gifts. So not a standard, not a standard gift or a standard set of gifts, but just like many of our own kids, they write out their Christmas list, and it might be Paw Patrol for one kid, and you know, who knows? I have a little boy. I don't have a girl, so I don't know what girls are looking for this year. But we're really committed to that, because that is what makes Christmas special, or the holiday season special for kids. So we have to rely on help from the community to do that. 1,200 is a lot of Christmas shopping. It's just a lot. So what we do is we ask people to be personal shoppers, essentially, for some of our kids. If that is interesting to you, I would ask that you send a note to development@chail.org and say, hey, I'm willing to be a personal shopper. Each list is $75 in value. So if you're able to take on 1, 10, 15, however many, that's hugely important and helpful to us, and really, really impactful to our kids. What you would do is you would go out and shop and bring those back to our agency unwrapped, and we wrap them up and make sure that each of those kids receive them on Christmas morning. It's a really, really special way to make sure that they feel like they are taken care of during the holiday season, which is a tough season for our kids. I'm going to double back just a little bit, and then certainly I want to open it up for questions if you have any. There's a couple other ways to get involved. Certainly, we always take volunteers, and we are really grateful for the volunteers that help us, whether that's seasonal or event-based volunteering. And then lastly, of course, we are very grateful for all of our financial donors. So that might look like becoming a monetary donor one time, or joining our monthly giving program, which is called Be the Proof. So we ask folks to be the proof that there are people in the community that care about our clients on an ongoing, recurring basis. Not because they work at Children's Home or because they have to, but because they see the potential in our clients. Certainly planned gifts in the form of trusts or estates. Children's Home has a really special piece of land, which is a 70-acre farmland property that was gifted to us by former Caterpillar CEO Bob Gilmore in honor of his late son. The property is called Scott's Prairie, and Bob lost his son to suicide, and it was his dream and his goal that we could take this property and use it for a recreational therapy piece of land. So our kids have access to that. It's really special. It's very unique. And we've seen really, really great impacts on their ability to access nature and spend time outside when it comes to their healing. And then certainly matching gifts. If you are fortunate enough to work for an organization that matches gifts to charities, we would be very grateful if you kept us in mind for that. So with that, I know that was a lot of information about Children's Home, but hopefully you learned something new. And at this point, I know I can open it up to any questions if you have them or provide any additional context. But thank you so much for the opportunity to talk a little bit about our mission and our agency.
So thank you for being here. I have a couple of comments. One is in your giving program at Christmas. Our Bill Lervock right here gives hundreds of gifts every year to Loaves and Fish downtown. You do that maybe with a partner sometimes, Brooklyn, but he's been doing that for years. Just thank you for that. Yeah. And then the other question or comment is some of the programs I'm involved with, I'll see children and they probably could use your services. How do we get in touch? Is it 211 to get in touch, or how do you do it?
Yeah, that's a great question. 211 can get you in touch. There's several different avenues, and it sort of depends on the nature of the need. So 211 can. If it is residential, for example, placement, I will say that we don't take private referrals for those because the state is at such a backlog that we would not have the capacity to do that. If it's some of our community-based programs, reaching out to myself and I can get you in the right direction, as well as visiting our website, which is chail.org. And from there, we've got program-specific contacts that we're always willing to sort of facilitate that intake process. No, it's good stuff.
Hi, as someone that comes from out of state and was a foster parent, a lot of our youth in Virginia, if they didn't have a placement, they were kind of put in like an institution. It was actually attached to the juvenile detention center, but it was called the youth shelter. Where do the youth here, when there's such a need for foster parents, where are those youth that are awaiting placements?
Yeah, that's a really great question. First and foremost, thank you so much for being a foster parent in any state. That's a really noble call, and I'm very grateful to you for doing that. The second is it's nuanced. So if a kid is waiting placement, yes, they're likely put in a shelter, of which there are several across our state, and they're not ideal. It's not an ideal setting. It's probably exactly what you're thinking. Perhaps, you know, very similar to attached to a juvenile detention center is not a great environment. So they might be in shelter. We know of lots of kids who are stuck in hospitals. So they are truly just stuck in an ER waiting room or stuck in a psychiatric bed, which is also not a good situation. Most recently, and when I say recent, I mean over the last few years, DCFS, I will be totally honest, has gotten themselves in a bit of hot water, in that kids are stuck in the system. And if DCFS isn't able to find a placement, whether that's a foster family or a shelter, because frankly, shelters are at capacity too, or a residential facility like our own also at capacity, kids end up sleeping in the office. They sleep in DCFS office, or kind of get juggled or passed around, like, you know, who's willing to take a kid for tonight? And I hate that that's the reality. I wish I had a better answer for you, but that is where we're at. The need is so great, and you know, the willingness or the ability for folks to answer that call is so low right now. We need so many more foster families. We need so many more residential facilities. We need so many more shelters. We need the quality of shelters to improve. We need the quality of residential facilities to improve. Our state is really, really finding themselves in a bind when it comes to what to do with these kids who are frankly just stuck in a system. we see a lot of kids who are in inappropriate placements just because there's no other place for them to go.
You know, I was talking to a gentleman the other day that from my church that's in the St. Vincent de Paul group that people come to them for funds. And he was telling me about they went to this home. It was very dark. They walked in. There was 5 children, a mother, and her father sitting on the couch with no legs. And the woman needed money for rent. And the slum landlord that they were living under charged them $25 for every day that their rent was due. And I thought to myself, the federal government is throwing money into communities with no plan, no group to hand it out properly. And it's organizations like yours that, I don't know, are you getting any help from the federal government or state?
We do, yeah. So the majority of our funding does come through state government. You know, the state of Illinois is not sitting on a stellar reputation in terms
Right.
of their ability to help right now. And that's okay, but yes, the majority of our funding does come through state, less federal, but state funding.
In this particular case, the mother is working as a custodian, earning $1,200 a month, take home $900. And her kids range in age from 2 to 14 years of age, 5 of them, probably from 5 different fathers. And these situations are all over the city. And it's criminal that the only people to take care of them are organizations like yours and churches. It was alarming to me just listening to this guy who happened to be an accountant telling me the story. And it's all over our city, all over our nation. And nothing's being done about it really, unless it's a charitable group like yours or a church. I don't see the federal government doing much but throwing money at it. Anyway, that's all I had to say.
Yeah, the stories are they're devastating, and they're devastating, and those are the stories that our community-based programs, for example, are really seeing day in and day out. So their caseload might be that and 9, 10, 12 other versions of that. You know, so I'm so grateful to work on a team and for an organization where, you know, we have 450 people who frankly could be doing a lot more glamorous work, and they could be making a lot more money, and they've chosen to commit their life to this work. And I'm proud to be part of that organization because, you know, we need folks to take care of situations just like that.
Where do you get that staff?
Excuse me?
Where do you get that staff that's working?
Yeah, so all different walks. Those might look like therapists, they might look like social workers. The majority are social workers, which is a calling in and of itself. We are struggling to recruit just like everyone else. I will say that I would not be able to stand up here in good faith and suggest that that's not the case, because the work that we do it's difficult. It's emotionally taxing, you know, to come to work and hear that story, you know, and 15 other stories like that every day is difficult. So the folks that we have really have a heart for the mission and a passion to help those who are in need of some additional support services. So the majority are kind of clinical social workers. Obviously at our schools, those are teachers. The majority of our residential and school-based clients are lower functioning, so an IQ of 50 to 70. So those are people who have a heart for the special education population, but kind of across the board.
You said people don't live there or do live, the kids?
At Knoxville, at that Knoxville building, they do not. No. If you showed up there, you wouldn't find any cute kids. You would find, you know, me and HR and accountants.
So you've got facilities that these kids go to, residential areas, the ones you're
Yeah, we do. Across the whole city, we've got 10 different facilities. Some of those are, yes, group homes in the community, so in neighborhoods. The youth farm campus is out off Plank Road, but yeah, we've got 10 different facilities across the city.
Very good.